I'm not convinced that those 14 million votes can be just thrown out with no check in place. I'm not convinced. Joe Biden is no longer running for president. He was forced out as a result of a political party coup by Kamala, Obama, Pelosi, Schumer, et cetera. All the major Democratic Party leaders just threw democracy out the window. 14 million votes in a primary, or in the primaries, to put Biden on the ticket now are meaningless. And we're all supposed to believe it's perfectly normal and perfectly correct for Kamala Harris to be installed as the nominee. There'll be no primaries. And I was trying to think back, when was the last time that a party was able just to, through the convention process, install a nominee, and exclusively. And I'm not quite sure exactly. I didn't figure it out date-wise, but certainly in the modern era, it's never happened before. So Kamala Harris is going to be, if the machine gets its way, the candidate for president for the Democratic Party without having obtained the vote of any individual American voter. And the left has lectured us on democracy. The left has lectured us on, how elections matter. And all of a sudden, those 14 million votes don't matter. And I can't imagine. It's not right. It's not, in my view, legal. Whether any court will do anything about it is another matter. But we're really in a crisis in terms of just losing all the hallmarks of our modern-day constitutional republic. And here's the statement I issued for Judicial Watch on it. Kind of talks about all the issues generally. President Biden's resignation from the presidential race is the result of a corrupt, arrogant, and anti-democratic process. Biden was forced to pull out of the presidential race as a result of a dangerously corrupt pressure campaign led by Obama, Pelosi, Schumer, and like-minded Democrats, which has effectively disenfranchised 14 million Americans who voted in the Democratic presidential primaries. Few Americans will buy the D.C. establishment's scheme to remove Biden from the presidential campaign over cognitive issues while ignoring his inability to serve as commander-in-chief. Kamala Harris, or is it Kamala? How am I supposed to pronounce it now? Because it changes. Is it Kamala or Kamala? I generally get confused about it. Vice President Harris, why don't I just stick with that? And the majority of the cabinet need to step up and invoke the 25th Amendment. And Congress should do an emergency investigation into Biden's fitness for office. The assassination attempt on former President Trump adds increased urgency to ensure we have a fully capable president. This is truly a national security crisis. So they just want to skip over all of this. And to make matters worse, we've had a coup against democracy, as the left likes to say. And of course, we're not going to know who the nominee officially of the Democratic Party is going to be until August. And it's election interference, pure and simple. There's nothing about this process that is normal, appropriate, or honest. You've been subject to some of the most significant psyop, gaslighting operations in modern American history the last week, telling you it's perfectly normal to remove Joe Biden from the ticket and just install, through just sheer power politics, another person to take his place. No primaries, no nothing. And a snap national primary or primaries to pick a new nominee would seem to be the most democratic approach to Biden's decision not to seek re-election. And at a minimum, a careful state-by-state and federal legal analysis is a necessary first step to help determine whether Biden can be replaced on the presidential ballot at this late stage in the presidential campaign. Judicial Watch is already investigating this election integrity issue, that the votes of 14 million Americans would be casually tossed aside by Democratic Party elites as a major corruption and election interference scandal. So that's the truth about what happened. You're not going to hear anything about that. Maybe you won't even hear too much from Republicans. They don't plan to do much of any of this. I've kind of highlighted a path forward for interested members of Congress to pursue, but they're going on vacation for the next 4 or 5, at least 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Oh, wait, no, it's a district work period when the House goes into recess. You know, and the machine is operating. Initially, Obama withheld his support for Kamala, and just literally a few hours ago, they put up a silly video where Kamala is pretending to be surprised by a phone call from Barack Obama and Michelle, where his endorsement of her is announced. And as I highlighted earlier, the corrupt Obama machine has its fingerprints all over this coup against Joe Biden. Look at this video I put up about one of those minions for Obama and what he's up to.
Look at here. Notoriously corrupt Obama AG and pal Eric Holder, who was forced to resign from office in disgrace. You remember Fast and Furious, that Judicial Watch helped uncover. Will vet Kamala Harris's potential picks for VP. Well, there you have it, further confirmation. Obama's running the show in the coup against so-called democracy. 14 million voters who voted in the primaries, the Democratic Party primaries, their votes have been wiped out. It's now Politburo. Biden remains in office despite his inability to perform the duties of office. Terrible corruption. And as you see with Eric Holder's involvement for Obama, some of the worst people in Washington, corruption-wise, are running it.
Yeah, I was on the Hill earlier this week, and there's grave concern about Biden's fitness for office.
Hey everyone, I'm walking back from a meeting up on Capitol Hill. I can tell you there's grave concern on Capitol Hill about the constitutional and national security crisis caused by President Biden's inability to serve as president. It looks like folks like Speaker Johnson and other responsible government officials are going to have to step forward to reassure our friends and warn our allies that someone with their mental faculties is actually running the store. These are dangerous times for America. And I tell you, let your members of Congress know that they need to step up as well and do their jobs. It's more important than ever.
So you got the corrupt Obama gang basically eliminating Joe Biden from the political chessboard. As you can see with Eric Holder, the corrupt Attorney General, Obama's buddy and pal, quote, vetting, essentially picking the vice presidential pick for Kamala Harris. And no one's running the store. We're supposed to pretend it's normal. I mean, the Wall Street Journal had an editorial the other day. Typically, I like the Journal editorials. They're a little bit ridiculously anti-Trump or anti-populist, I would think is the better way of putting it in some ways. But they were saying, oh, it's good to leave, but we should just leave Biden in office. We've been running as a committee anyway, the foreign policy of the country. It doesn't matter if it continues to run as a committee in the future. Well, I mean, that might be technically true that it's been run as a committee, but that's an abomination unto our constitutional republic. That's not the way it's supposed to work in our republic. The president's supposed to be running the show. And if he can't do it because of cognitive disability, he needs to be removed. And I'm not convinced this whole process is legal in terms of the installation of Kamala Harris. I'm not convinced that those 14 million votes can be just thrown out with no check in place. I'm not convinced. And that's why I said we're going to be doing this serious investigation. I was on Maria Bartiromo's show earlier this week talking about these and other issues. Let's bring that up.
Judicial Watch has said, quote, at a minimum, a careful state-by-state and federal legal analysis is necessary as a first step to help determine whether Biden can be replaced on the presidential ballot at this late stage in the presidential campaign. Judicial Watch is already investigating this election integrity issue, Tom. What's your take there in terms of a fair election come November?
Well, you know, in many ways, this election's already been compromised in the sense of targeting Trump, holding him hostage up in New York for 6 weeks during that kangaroo court proceeding. And here you've got the primary process, again, that involves the civil rights of 14 million Americans that's essentially been rigged. Why don't the Democrats run a snap primary in August? The United Kingdom did a snap election. Certainly they can figure out a way to have voters have a say here. And frankly, the best legal approach would be to admit that there was a cognitive issue that required Biden to leave.
Yeah.
But of course, that would mean he'd have to leave the presidency because, you know, it's that sort of act of God. Either, you know, someone has a disability or or dies. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit more flexibility in terms of replacing the person on the ballot. Here, it's just purely political. And I think it's like 25, 26 states, they don't even mention how to remove someone from the ballot. They don't really contemplate this. And to me, that's where the courts may have an interest in figuring out, well, what do the votes of the people who participated mean? If it means nothing, then, you know, was there civil rights violations? And I would strictly enforce the law to require Biden to be on the ballot. But, you know, we're all supposed to just move along, right? You know, someone gets nearly assassinated, Secret Service head resigns, move along. Trump gets prosecuted illicitly, move along. The election gets rigged through this primary coup, move along. I don't want to move along, and the American people don't want to move along.
No,
You know, as I watch myself on TV, what occurs to me is I know why the left hates us, and because what I said is perfectly reasonable and sensible. And there are so few voices that take this Judicial Watch approach to these cutting-edge issues. And so when there is truth, the left gets angry. And that's why they attack Judicial Watch so much. That's why they're obsessed with attacking me and mocking Judicial Watch, mocking me, rather than dealing with the truth I put out there. That this is a house of cards, the emperor has no clothes, and our republic and the rights of millions of Americans are just being violated and eviscerated, and we're all supposed to pretend it's not happening. And our friends at the Heritage Foundation have analyzed this, and you can be sure that we're going to be taking a look at this, and I hope the Trump campaign takes a look at this as well. I mean, there was a case, for instance, back, I think it was in 2006, a Circuit Court of Appeals, an appellate court, found that the Democratic Party had standing to challenge the removal of a key Republican leader at the time, Tom DeLay, who was I think he was House Majority Leader at the time, maybe. But, you know, one of the national Republican House leaders, he had to be removed from the ballot because he was either, I forget what the circumstances were. He was either stepping aside, resigned, or it doesn't really matter. But the point was, they tried to remove him from the ballot, and the party had standing to challenge it. So there's nothing like this that's ever happened before. The only comparable, at least in modern history, is Lyndon Johnson declining to run in 1968. Well, the challenge with Johnson was it was a political challenge he faced. He didn't have a cognitive issue that prevented him from running. And so Kamala Harris can't have her cake and eat it too. You can't involve yourself in a coup against the president to remove him from the head of the ticket and pretend that there shouldn't be a follow-up in terms of his ability to serve as president. And I've suggested to Congress that they haul in every cabinet official and question them about this. You can invite Kamala Harris. I think constitutionally it's going to be hard to get her in. But this is a real crisis. And practically speaking, under the 25th Amendment, unless there's political pressure just to have Biden resign from office, and that it happens that way, like they did. By the way, the coup involved threatening to invoke the 25th Amendment against Biden to get him to pull back. That was what the New York Post reported. But the 25th Amendment requires the cooperation of the majority of the Biden cabinet, the vice president, and 2/3 of both houses of Congress. So it's necessarily bipartisan. And I think the concern about Joe Biden is necessarily bipartisan. And that concern is being muted because it's politically inconvenient for the Democrats right now. Because the question about Kamala Harris now is what she knew and when about Joe Biden's cognitive disability that required him to leave the campaign. I mean, so for 6 months, the country's not going to be protected? That's unacceptable to me. So what did Congress do? They went on vacation. That's the situation we're in. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.